This video is asking that you, on May 8th, if you live in Indiana, to support Richard Murdock in the primary in the Senate against Lugar. And if you don't live in Indiana, then contribute, because this is a vital election. I turned on the radio last night, and Dick Morris was talking about it on Hannity and how vital it is to elect Murdock. Then I listened to Mark Levine, and he talked about it. National Review yesterday came out to support Murdock. DeMint in the Senate supported Murdock. All over the incumbent. It's very unusual, but that's because Lugar has served a long time, and it's time to retire him. First, I want to begin with a story about, it has kind of interesting aspects of the Titanic, since I'm recording this a few days after the Titanic's 100th anniversary of sinking. These men are standing on the shore of a sea, and they see a large crowd gathered. They walk over, and it's to christen a ship and to send it off for its first journey. And then they see on the other side an old battered ship's coming in. And the captain gets off and said it's the ship's last journey. It's crossed the ocean many times, but it's finally finished. And they said there was a large crowd to send the ship off, and nobody knew if the ship was going to even make it the first time. But the old ship that's done a good job, it's come back, and nobody's there to greet it. Well, I thought about that in several contexts. First of all, an example of the Titanic, it's supposed to be unsinkable, and it went across the ocean, didn't even make it across the ocean the first time. And I liken that to President Obama, who was sent off with such accolades and the Messiah and the greatest guy ever, and he's going to lower the seas and everything else, and it's been a complete disaster. And on the other hand, the battered old ship coming in, Lugar, it's time to retire him because he's not done an effective job. He's brought a lot of money to Indiana in terms of earmarks over the years, which is one of the things that constitutional conservatives want to end, but it's really time to retire him in favor of a great conservative named Richard Murdock, who's endorsed, I heard last night on the radio, just listening, that Dick Morris was talking about how important it was to elect him. Then Mark Levine was talking about it. Heard that National Review yesterday endorsed him. Senator DeMint endorsed him. And people recognize how important a race this is. I heard Richard Murdock speak recently, and he used the story of the Titanic in a different way. He said what's unknown to most people about it is that the crew of the Titanic was very veteran crew. Many of them had crossed the ocean 100 times. And so obviously they were on a ship that they thought was unsinkable. When they left, the headline said unsinkable Titanic. And they had done it so many times they weren't paying attention. They didn't think that any iceberg out there could derail them. That's sort of the way Senator Lugar and other senators in the Senate, they've done this 100 times, and they think America's invulnerable and there's nothing they can do, let alone that China's now got an aircraft carrier and 60 submarines in the Pacific. And Russia, and Obama just said at a mic he thought was closed that he's going to be a lot more flexible in reducing our missiles if he gets reelected. And the financial icebergs out there that Obama just keeps raising the trillions and trillions and trillions to our debt and doesn't have any plan to end that. There are real icebergs out there that can sink us, and we have to be very careful. And Lugar's not paying attention. Now, what are the specific issues? Well, first, Lugar is having all these ads on his behalf that are complete lies. And I just want to quickly explain the main ad. First of all, I said he only shows up to work 66% of the time. Well, first of all, when you're state treasurer of Indiana, you're automatically on 13 different commissions. You only vote on a couple of them. And historically, you're supposed to send your staff to those commissions where you don't vote, but they prepare the financial reports. So it makes more sense for them to be there. And they report to the state treasurer. You want the state treasurer doing other things, being at the meetings where he actually votes, and then figuring out how to invest the money and safeguard the dollars, not to be at every wasted committee meeting. Now, if you add up his staff and him, they're 99.8% attendance. So that's a complete lie by Lugar's. Now, second of all, they say he's a tax cheat, that Murdock's a tax cheat. He bought a condo in Indianapolis, a second home, so he could be there when the state government was in session. And he bought the condo from somebody for whom it was the first residence, and therefore there was a homestead exemption. He tried for several years to get that homestead exemption removed, and it took a long time because of the bureaucracy to get it removed, and even he being state treasurer. And if you check his file, it says clearly there that it wasn't his fault, it was the government's fault. That's another lie by Lugar, his people. And the third lie is Lugar saying he invested in junk bonds. Well, first of all, Murdock has invested brilliantly for Indiana. Indiana now has a surplus, and he's raised billions of dollars and because of his investments. And you're not going to strike 1,000% Now, the so-called junk bonds were high-yield bonds from Chrysler, and the irony here is, and the hypocrisy is that Murdock voted for TARP to bail out Chrysler. So it was okay for the taxpayers to invest in Chrysler, evidently, him to use taxpayer money for that, but not for Murdock to use his best wisdom and try and invest that way. Another ridiculous charge from the Murdock people. Now, from the Lugar people. Now, really, why do we have to get rid of Lugar? I mean, he's sure, first of all, he's so 80 plus years old. But you know, if he could do the work, great. Problem is, first of all, he's got no house in Indiana. He hasn't been in Indiana for years. So what kind of guy supposed to represent the state of Indiana doesn't even live there? Can't even, I mean, has no residence there. They're very far serious issues. First of all, he's voted for all these extreme left-wing radical justices that Obama's appointed, and voted to confirm another extreme leftist, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He supported the TARP funds, which just become an Obama slush fund. He's a big earmark guy, which is something that people who are fiscally responsible hate. He refused to sign a letter signed by 32 Republican senators opposing Obamacare. He's an Obamacare supporter. Obama calls him his best friend in the Republican Party. I mean, this is a guy who's a rhino, Republican in name only, and it's time to be defeated. Now, I know Democrats aren't going to be here and be concerned about this, except Lugar is trying to get Democrats to cross over and vote for him. And that shows you how liberal the guy is. And so if you want a liberal guy, elect a Democrat. Why have a liberal Republican like Lugar doing this? Now, it's true that he's endorsed by several of the establishment Republicans. That's because of the incumbent, and they have to. But quietly, a lot of them have called Murdock and said, "We really support you. We hope you win." And I think for the sake of Indiana and the sake of the United States, that he does win. He asked an important senator if it was worth this whole thing of challenging Lugar and getting involved. The guy said, you know, if I just had 4 or 5 guys like you in the Senate, it could make all the difference in the world. That's why this race is so crucial. And that's why Lugar has got to be retired gracefully after many years of service. And Richard Murdock, who's currently the state treasurer, and Indiana is one of the few states with a budget surplus, that Murdock be the nominee from the Republican Party to face the Democrat, and then win and take his place in the Senate to help America restore its great honor and dignity. We're dealing with a horrible situation of massive deficits, high unemployment, housing collapse, fraud and abuse from the Obama administration, eviscerating our military, betraying our allies. We've got to get this righted or America is in big trouble. Please, please support Richard Murdock.